When leaders accuse Beijing of hacking U.S. voting machines, the headline rarely matches reality. The question is, who designed this narrative, what domestic wounds it covers up, and why Washington needs a fabricated threat to justify economic decoupling? Today, we read Trump's accusation not as an espionage report, but as a strategic lever in great power competition. This move forces a permanent rivalry that benefits neither side economically while locking the world into high-cost conflict. The narrative that China is actively rigging American elections through bot farms or direct hacking attempts is effectively the emperor's new clothes of modern geopolitics. While Donald Trump and other officials frame this interference as an existential threat requiring immediate action, strategic analysis suggests a different reality entirely. Unlike Russia in 2016, which employed aggressive reconnaissance on voter infrastructure to sow chaos, China has largely abandoned direct disruption tactics. According to data from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Beijing studied Moscow's playbook, but chose a divergent path focused on long-term soft power rather than immediate election outcomes. This shift reveals a fundamental strategic paradox at the heart of Chinese foreign policy. Influence operations that rely on economic integration require stability above all else. A successful plot to cause political chaos or institutional collapse in Washington would directly undermine Beijing's primary goal, maintaining the predictable environment necessary for trade and investment. Therefore, aggressive interference is counterproductive to their core interests. They are far more interested in shaping opinion over decades through organized student groups and business leader networks than they are in flipping a single election outcome today by deploying disruptive messaging that could trigger a retaliatory war. Framing elections as foreign-controlled plots obscures the true nature of influence operations, which exploit pre-existing domestic vulnerabilities rather than creating them from scratch. By attributing political volatility to external actors like China or Russia, U.S. policymakers ignore structural failures within their own system. The so-called Svengali effect suggests that when leaders claim a foreign power is pulling strings behind every election result, they are often hiding the fact that internal fractures, such as deep income inequality and social discontent, are driving real voter behavior. This dynamic allows politicians to sidestep difficult domestic reforms while simultaneously using those same fractures as a pretext for aggressive foreign policy actions against Beijing. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. The accusation of interference serves as a potent political lever to justify decoupling and sanctions that benefit neither side in the short term but solidify long-term great power competition. It transforms complex economic interdependence into a binary security threat, allowing Washington to mobilize domestic support for policies like trade restrictions that might otherwise face fierce resistance from business sectors reliant on Chinese markets. With 2 or 3 new election security studies currently underway, this narrative gains renewed momentum as officials seek concrete evidence of threats where the actual data shows a shift away from direct disruption toward image management campaigns aimed at improving China's global standing over time. This strategic trap explains why Beijing often goes silent in response to accusations rather than issuing denials or counterattacks. They have no interest in a chaotic U.S. election that hurts their trade, and they know Washington knows it too. The real story is not about stolen ballots, but how both sides use the fear of interference as a tool for domestic political consolidation. For curious viewers watching from afar, understanding this dynamic means realizing that every time China meddled is cited in the news, it is often less about espionage and more about the U.S. using that narrative to justify breaking its own economic ties with China's markets, regardless of whether actual interference occurred. The stakes extend far beyond a single election cycle or even a decade. We are now 10 years past the 2016 U.S. elections, marking a significant shift in public awareness and technical defenses, where the focus has moved from securing voting machines to managing information ecosystems. However, as we look at the broader picture of global stability, the data points toward a worst social crisis in a century characterized by widening income inequality, healthcare disparities, education gaps, and rising suicide rates among vulnerable populations. These are the conditions that foreign actors can exploit but not create from thin air. By focusing on external enemies, nations avoid addressing these internal structural failures while simultaneously escalating tensions with rivals who prefer stability over conflict. The economic statecraft angle reveals that Trump's accusations function as a mechanism to force decoupling and lock in great power competition regardless of the factual accuracy of the claims. This approach treats trade not as mutual benefit but as national security risk, allowing policymakers to bypass traditional business concerns about supply chains and market access. The result is a world where economic interdependence becomes a weaponized vulnerability rather than a stabilizing force. Both sides understand that this path leads to higher costs for consumers and reduced growth opportunities, yet the political incentives drive them forward regardless of the negative outcomes. This framework shifts our perspective from asking who is cheating to understanding what incentives are driving the noise. It explains why Beijing often ignores accusations. They have no interest in a chaotic U.S. election that hurts their trade, and they know Washington knows it too. The accusation itself becomes the weapon used to justify breaking economic ties with China's markets, regardless of whether actual interference occurred. For viewers trying to make sense of global events, this means recognizing that every time China meddled is cited in the news, it is often less about espionage and more about how Washington uses that narrative to lock itself into a permanent rivalry. The strategic logic holds firm. China studies Russia's 2016 playbook, but chooses a different path focused on long-term soft power campaigns aimed at image improvement rather than direct election disruption. Framing interference as an external Svengali plot obscures the true nature of influence operations, which exploit pre-existing domestic vulnerabilities like social discontent and economic inequality. Beijing utilizes organized student groups, business leaders in protest movements, and market access leverage to shape opinion, rather than deploying disruptive messaging seen in 2016. This distinction is critical for anyone trying to understand why states act as they do when the stakes involve global stability versus short-term political gain. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.